Here we are at No Boundaries. We're embarking on session 2. Are we in the right place, where we explore the role of arts and culture in the development and articulation of place? And no one better to start us off than Claire Doherty, founder and director of Situations, one of the world's foremost producers of arts projects which grow out of place. Situations invites artists and performers to respond to specific places or situations to produce temporary or long-term projects with the audience at the centre of how the idea unfolds. Situations is renowned for creating transformative art experiences. For example, in 2016, working with the Astor Gates to create Sanctum, a 552-hour-long, non-stop programme of performance by 700 performers in the ruin of English Heritage Temple Church in Bristol. A mere 10 minutes today, Claire, but nonetheless important for that. Over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a real delight to be here today. So I like to think of No Boundaries as a method of taking bearings. It's looking up and looking out across our sector. And could I have the presentation up? Thank you. And I was wondering if I could just share with you some thoughts about a particular term. I think No Boundaries is brilliant at giving us terms and language that get at the very heart of what we're trying to do, what we're battling with, of what we're trying to push the boundaries of. And I'm interested in a particular term that I hear in many artistic conversations that I have, but also across funding criteria and in policy documents, and that is this term, relevance. Now, I founded an arts organisation called Situations in 2002, and we commission and produce artworks that grow out of the untold stories and untapped potential of specific places. And because our work occurs in the spaces of everyday lives, often unexpectedly in unexpected locations, and we build an audience every single time, a new audience every single time we create works such as this in New Zealand, a barricade across one of the city streets, or this, a floating island nation around the southwest coast for the Cultural Olympiad. And because that work occurs in those spaces, in the public realm, and building that new audience each time, this question of relevance is of crucial importance to our success and to the success of the work. If the work isn't timely and it doesn't connect to that place and people of that place, it fails. In fact, it's unlikely to survive. In fact, it could well be destroyed. But over the 15 years that I've been working in this area, cajoling authorities to commission and support new forms of public art, and working with artists to persuade them to come out of the studio, to come out of the theatre rehearsal space, to perform in spaces unexpectedly, this word relevance has become a bit problematic. In fact, it's become a means to beat the ambition out of projects sometimes, and sometimes even to silence or censor the work. There's a tendency, when we say this word relevance, to focus on what we know of a place, perhaps the most obvious characteristics of a place. There's a tendency, in particular when working in commissioning new works out of place, to draw local boundaries around relevance, and to say that only those who are local can know what is relevant to that place. Or worse still, and this is perhaps the worst fault of producers such as myself, to determine, to direct what is relevant to others. And this is picked up in Nina Simon's current book, The Art of Relevance. It's a brilliant book written by the museum director of Santa Monica Museum. So, what might be an alternative way that I could, in the next 6 minutes or so, suggest of considering how we produce arts and culture that is truly relevant, that unlocks opportunities, but really pushes the boundaries of what we've seen before in regards to artworks that emerge out of place, but also across our entire sector. Now, we developed a set of slightly tongue-in-cheek new rules of public art. Some of you may have seen them. And that really came out of 10 years of trying to persuade local authorities and commissioners to use public art funding in completely different ways. And you can download some of them on our website. They include things like don't waste time on definitions, stop trying to wayfind and get lost, and it doesn't have to look like public art. But I wanted to use a similar kind of perhaps technique to think of just 4 principles which we might consider when thinking about relevance. And these have been gleaned from working across really diverse places, from this new redevelopment site, Oslo Harbour in Norway, across the meadows of Runnymede, where the Magna Carta was sealed 800 years ago, from the cells of Richmond Castle, where conscientious objectors were incarcerated in 1916, to the fishing port of Brixham, and the landscape and streets of Torbay down in South Devon. And these principles, I'm hoping, might just indicate some of the knotty issues that are in making work that is relevant and really thinking about how we produce that. So the first, get familiar, but seek the unfamiliar. Our sector, as we've heard this morning, is really good at getting under the skin of a place. We've got really sophisticated ways of engaging now, of really committing to what Claire and Jamie were saying, radical empathy. Our engagement processes are embedded, they're informed, they're collaborative, and we see this in Creative People and Places projects across the UK, from Heart of Glass to Super Slow Way. But the reason we work with artists is for their capacity to help us see things as if they were different. And so being relevant may well be getting under the skin of the place, but it may be offering new perspectives of place that could never be imagined. On the banks of the fjord in Oslo, we were asked to come up with an idea for a public art programme across the whole of the harbour to contribute to place making. But when we invited the artists Future Farmers and Katie Patterson there, we could never have imagined what they might come up with. They got to know the place, they spent time there, they did residencies, they worked with local partners, but what emerged was something nobody had quite determined as public art. Future Farmers, for example, came up with a completely new land use project as a way of sort of smuggling in a new set of owners for that space through allotments, through creating an amazing grain field using ancient grains, through modelling the potential of a public bakehouse, which has now subsequently been built and involves a whole range of bakeries, immigrant bakeries in the east side of Oslo, and that piece of land is now protected in perpetuity. And equally, we couldn't have imagined that Katie Patterson would come up with a work for 100 years future library, which involves every year, for 100 years, a writer writing a text which is left unread until the year 2114. Gradually, over the next 100 years, this library of text is being contributed to the library in Norway. Now, can you imagine trying to persuade the local authorities of Oslo to invest in a project that no one could see and no one could read until 2114? But the reason it's relevant is, can you imagine the young people who are now being asked to think about what would you write to someone in 2114 about the future you want to see? It's the spark of the imagination and the spark of what Oslo could be in 100 years that made it relevant in that place. The second, connect but don't target. Brian Eno suggested perhaps the strongest single importance of a work of art is the celebration of some kind of temporary community. Rather than targeting particular communities, we try and create one through our projects. When Theaster Gates came to Bristol in 2015 as part of the European Green Capital, he created a work which created a community of 700 performers, and I'm just going to show you in the background a tiny bit of this video. It's just going to run for a minute. We'll turn the sound up in a sec. And what was fascinating about this project was that the programme was unannounced. It was a very intimate space, only 50 people at a time. But it created something remarkable. It created a space in which people were gathering and creating connections between them. It ceased to be Theaster Gates projects. It was referred to by its name, Sanctum. It ceased to be a situations project. It was owned by the city. Now, in regards to being relevant, this work came about because of the European Green Capital. It came about because I approached Theaster wanting to examine what is sustainable. But whilst it was made of recycled materials from all over the city, in which we saw the city's histories collide in this amazing structure, it wasn't about sustainability. It was about the soul of the city. It was about asking that question of what sustains a city is perhaps the connections between us. And Theaster, as an outsider, understand that. Could I take the sound up a little bit, please? Can you hear? Maybe not. Don't worry. What he said was that art only exists, only works, if people believe in it. And that's the thing that we've seen happen time and time again in these kinds of works, where actually there was created with Sanctum a kind of flat structure, where actually no one was announced as a performer, and so therefore it equated one to the other. There were choirs, there was salsa bands, there was metal heads, there was singer-songwriters, there were performance poets from age 17 to age 80. And it created an extraordinary sense of what's possible in the ruin of Temple Church, which had been closed for 75 years. So that relevance, that sense of creating a work which no one had imagined before, but opening out the invitation leads us to this next key principle, which is amplify the local, so the specifics of place, and think about place in a constant state of becoming, not a site that has fixed boundaries, but in a constant state of becoming. But champion that outsider. Sanctum could never have happened without the vision of that extraordinary artist that is Theaster Gates, along with all the participants and all the local people involved in making that happen. And finally, don't be afraid to unsettle. When I refer to placemaking, one of the most difficult things about working in that area, and we work with lots of different non-arts partners, is the sense that placemaking is affirming an identity. There's a great nervousness in cultural tourism about creating anything that unsettles a sense of place. The brilliant researchers at UCLan, who work with Heart of Glass amongst many others in the psychosocial unit there, undertook a great deal of research and work on our work as part of the HRC Cultural Value Project. But what really emerged that was of interest there is what they found is that our work definitely unlocked potential and it created a sense of place, but it was most productive. It really created transformative moments for people when it unsettled a sense of place. And it's that unsettling that we see, for example, in Owen Shear's brilliant dedication, strident dedication, in the midst of the Magna Carta celebrations at Runnymede. And you see here Prince William sitting as a commoner alongside a number of other performers there. We saw it in the citizens who became citizens of a new island nation as part of Nowhere Island. That work unsettled a sense of sovereignty, a sense of place, a sense of what a sculpture could be, and as a result created a reflection, created reflective individuals to think on your relationship to each other and the place in the world. The interventions and the use of time in our one-day sculpture works in New Zealand, for example, unsettled because they were unannounced, unexpected, and it's that sense of surprise sometimes that is most effective. And finally, in terms of relevance, right now there are 30 untrained male singers who are working with a brilliant young composer called Verity Standen at Richmond Castle, where 16 conscientious objectors were held in 1916 before being sentenced to death for their beliefs. English Heritage, who are our partner on that project, tell the story of England. And the question is, how is conscientious objection relevant now? And it's through the work with these extraordinary male singers who are engaged in the making of that work that will completely remake a sense of that place, making it perhaps more vibrant, more relevant, more strident now in the middle of North Yorkshire. And this goes to the very heart of what I believe in terms of unsettling. Well-being, which we so often talk about as an impact in the arts, may result from being unsettled. And I want to see in the future producers who are making work in this way being really brave about work that unsettles and as a result, transforms. Thanks.
Now I'd like to introduce Gabriella Gomez-Mont, who has flown in all the way from Mexico City to be with us at No Boundaries. Gabriella works in a city with over 8 million residents, right, and runs the Laboratorio para la Ciudad, the experimental arm and creative think tank of the Mexico City government, reporting to its mayor. The lab works across diverse areas ranging from urban creativity, mobility, governance, and civic tech. And she tells me they actually have quite a small team to deliver all of that. Besides her fascination with all things city, Gabriella is also a journalist, a visual artist, a director of documentary films, as well as a creative advisor to several cities, universities, and companies. Welcome, Gabriella.
So today, first of all, I lost my voice on Friday, so please bear with me. I will talk as loudly as possible. And I love today's topic about no boundaries and about place. And I wanted to tell you about the ajolote that you might know. First of all, no boundaries. This is actually a living stem cell. So if you pop out an eye or you cut one of their hearts in the middle, it will actually grow back. You can actually also implant a leg from one into another because it is, as I mentioned, a living stem cell place. Back in the 1900s, and the axolotl has been a fascinating creature for us since Aztec times, they put one of these on a ship and sent it to the Paris Fair. To their huge surprise, weeks later when the ship came in, there was a boring, brown, big salamander. So basically what happened is we found out that the axolotl exists only in Mexico City because we don't have iode because of the altitude. So in a certain sense, that also talks about place, things that exist only in one certain geography. So both the axolotl and I call this home, Mexico City. It's 22 million people in a metropolitan area. 50% of our population is under age 29, so it's also a very young city. 5 million people ride the subway every day, so all of our numbers are superlative, and also it's a city that's caught up in several paradoxes. On one hand, we have number 1, now number 3 billionaire of the world living in the city, but at the same time, we have one of the lowest minimum wages in the whole of Latin America. So in a certain sense, as you can imagine, it was quite daunting when I got a call from the mayor of Mexico City. And never having imagined myself working in government, and as was mentioned, I was a journalist and dedicated to culture, he offered up a provocative, very provocative proposal of saying, invent a city department. You can do whatever you want. You have free reign. We'll talk about it in 4 months and see if it happens. So basically, my task, since I did not want to work in government, was to make it outlandish enough so he'd say no. As you can probably imagine, that didn't necessarily work out. And 10 days later, after I presented, I was in a museum that I had worked before, but this time filled with about 200, mostly men in suits and ties. So it was quite a shock, and I think I'm still shocked since then. So what is the lab exactly? Creative think tank, experimental arm. We deal with 2 subjects mainly. One of them is civic innovation. How can we start reimagining and reinventing the way that government and civil society come together? The other one is urban creativity. How does the city in and of itself become this traveling surface for ideas, this place of experimentation? We're not the only lab in the world, nor the only experimental arm. There are several, but we are the first that was born in Latin America and in emerging city as well as in a megalopolis. And as you can imagine, this is very much what makes us quite a particular lab, Mexico City in and of itself, because most of these labs are actually the brainchilds of the places that they were born. This is my team, 20 people. It's an interesting motley crew. Half of them come from political science, urban geography, internationalists, civic tech, data analysts. But then the other half, and it's exactly the half, are artists, designers, historians, editors, writers, filmmakers, architects, social innovation experts. So I must say at the beginning it was quite a coming together because there are two very different languages. But nowadays I think it's very much what the ethos of the lab is about. And it's such a motley crew that I even have a mass wrestler in my team, believe it or not, that during the day is a bureaucrat and during the night is a world famous mass wrestler fighting for the rights of pedestrians, and he's been an activist for several years. So I think Jorge very well embodies that ethos of the lab, because one of the other things that we do is try to bridge civil society and government. How can we start thinking about what government should be, especially for a younger generation, when mistrust is at an all-time low, and at the same time, another paradox, people wanting to sink their hands into the city and to help and to create is actually at an all-time high in the place that we live. So a creative office within government. It's not a cultural office. What we do, yes, is cultural policy sometimes, but we work in this in-between space between the urban, the political, the social, the creative. And we're very much about the tensions and the translations that exist both within and without government, this joining up together, but also are trying to explore new urban languages and political forms that come from bringing a motley crew and the unusual suspects into the walls of government and being able to figure out what this actually means, society deciding together, how to move together, how to live together, how to enjoy together. One of our areas of speciality, as paradoxical as that sounds, is the gap between things, the conversations that are not being had within government, the methodologies that are not being used, the people that are not used to basically adding their energy and their talent into the city structures. We also think of the city as a system of systems, this place, an influx where everything combines, this dynamic and dynamic. I love that the etymology of it comes both from movement, but also from dynamite. And I think that is where we lie. And our big question, I think, at heart, and the reason why we have this mix of people and disciplines is what happens when the creative ethos that we know so well in the cultural fields and that is capable of bringing these realities into place that have their own rules of engagement and their own ways of being. What happens if they get let loose into the city, and what happens if that creative ethos becomes part of bureaucracy and also a way of not only thinking about cultural policy, but also about mobility or about public space. So it's the capacity to reimagine, to be able to reframe. We also love shape-shifting boundaries. The lab was actually designed to allow for multidisciplinary collaboration. So even though my team is already a motley crew, as I mentioned, we also have joined up forces with primatologists and with a whole series of other people that when you put them together with city people and start thinking about the possibilities, it becomes incredibly interesting. This is our space. We thought we'd create a metaphorical and literal gesture of who we wanted to be about being able to bring in other people into government walls. So we created out of a public building a public space. This is the rooftop. And we continuously hold sessions. We've had both the mayor of Mexico City, as you see right there, but we've also had Perry Chen, the co-founder of Kickstarter, with us for a whole month, and a whole series of incredibly amazing people that I don't think any public office in Mexico City had seen. So as a good lab, we work with experiments, and we have the huge luxury of being able to do these small, playful urban interventions and questions that allow us to think further. But then we've also been able to dabble into public policy, pass laws. This is the mayor also presenting the open city law, which we created. And if you put artists to create laws, and I never thought it would be so fun, suddenly you end up with a dynamic law that, besides thinking about the right of citizens to not only be part of voting every once or so often, but actually be part of the design of public policy, it also has the capacity to update itself, for example. We work a lot within government to get the skill sets up for the agendas that we need. We've worked with programs of bringing young, talented people within the walls of government, created platforms, the open data protocol, so some very solid government work, if you will. But we also work with a community abroad trying to prototype that society that we imagine. So this is one of the events that we hosted, a Open Data Festival, where we had about 1,027 people signing up. So as I mentioned, it's really interesting to see how if you actually talk to people in the language that is fascinating to them, suddenly everything gets filled up. We are working right now on cultural policy. All of the presentations that you've seen today is very inspiring to me because we are trying to prep government to actually have the city in and of itself become that place where these ideas can take hold and take place, and for the lab to be that entry point into people who want to work with the city in different ways, especially because we imagine the city not only through its objective topographies, but we also think a city is made up of its social imaginaries, and we try to work with the symbolic infrastructure of a city. So even though we work with data, and my urban geographer has nowadays like 600 maps, and this, for example, is a map where we're crossing lack of access to public space, segregation, numbers, as well as concentration per block of kids, because Mexico City, believe it or not, and the metropolitan area has 5 million kids, which is basically the size of a Finland, of a Denmark, only of children that are 14 or less. So this is actually giving us the possibility of intervening very specific places with specific characteristics. But we also did the first urban imaginary survey of Mexico City and had 31 people telling us about how do they imagine the city, what do they think of the city, because we also think that we cannot forget that cities are emotional beings and societies are emotional beings. And I think that Brexit and Trump, could not mention, has shown us that we can not only deal with reality, but we have to also deal with that reality and those cities that live in people's heads. So one example, and we have about 30 ongoing experiments simultaneously, but I'll give you one example of how we work the policy side as well as the outlandish, if you will, social imaginary side. So one of the things that we did was survey what was happening with the play spaces in Mexico City, and found, first of all, that we were creating parks where there were the least concentration of kids, and second of all, that there was no spatial justice. We are not creating open spaces in the place that are needed the most. And when we do, we just like copy paste these plasticky places that you can see up there. So what does that actually mean in terms of the DNA of cities and the the playful possibilities that they should provoke? We're also working with new tools to bring kids into the conversation. I have a whole team, the Playful Cities team, that works with kids, with play as a city building tool. And so we've found ways of bringing in their own ideas and their own imaginaries. And we just presented this, and it will now be part of the the city plan until for the next 10 years. But at the same time, what we're doing is we asked the city to donate 3 different public spaces for this experiment, and now we're going to be doing a call for proposal for urban toys. Can we start reimagining the way that cities are playful and the way that kids play? So another example would be we work both on Vision Zero. Unfortunately, 3 people die in Mexico City because of traffic accidents every day, and it's the number one leading cause of children's and adolescent deaths in the city. So we do policy work very closely with Ministry of Transportation, but at the same time, we also closed down the elevated highway of Mexico City for the first time since it was built. And as you know, this is actually the epitome of a car privileged city. And so just closing it down and having people take that road and be biking and having more than 5,000 people up there was amazing. I wouldn't tell this to the mayor, but I don't think it was a coincidence that we had our first protest up there a few weeks after we did this, because part of the purpose is how do you open up urban imaginaries and possibilities. Another thing that stemmed from the data that I just told you is Peatón Niños, liberating streets for kids and play. So what we've been doing is trying to figure out, in this combination, as I mentioned, of lack of open space and of kids, this is Jorge, who's a huge hit with the kids. How can we start creating play spaces in poor areas where there's no lack of public space? We're working on the proper playgrounds, but while that gets there, can there be policy where people can close down streets? And one of the very interesting things that we saw is that there's a whole community organization and gathering that gets born when you close down streets, and neighbors getting together and stuff. So now we're working with these civic actors and figuring out what that actually means. So those are a few images. So basically what we're trying to do, to finalize my presentation, is to really think about the creative capacity of a society. What does it mean to go beyond the white cube? What does it mean for the city in and of itself to become part of this conversation and to let artists and people from culture loose into other areas? My last example will be Mapaton, just to take it somewhere completely different, and a mobility project. These little green buses actually move 14 million individual rides a day. So 70% of our population moves on this. But since they grew up with the city, we had no idea what was happening on the ground. So we put together a working table and try to figure out how we could actually have data to have proper policy on this, but also so people could more easily navigate the city. And the idea that we came up with was creating a citywide game where you would get points from mapping from point A to point B, which is no easy feat because we found out that, for example, only one line takes 9 hours and a half to and fro and goes through Mexico City and 2 extra states. Who knew? And basically, to our huge surprise, we had 4,000 people signing up, 700 teams, and in 2 weeks and a half, we had the equivalent of more than 400 mapping days, 1 turnaround and a half across the circumference of the Earth. This is a mayor giving the prize to 50 of the intense mappers of Mexico City. And then just this becoming also a point of conversation in articles, several articles that came out about what happens when government starts crowdsourcing and starts using the talent of its citizens in different ways, and thinking about governance, which is also another of the subjects. I had a couple of more examples, but since I usually talk really quickly and my voice is slowing me down, so I'll stop there. But I'd be very happy to answer any questions later on. Thank you so much.
I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our colleagues from Barking and Dagenham. Helen Ball is the Engagement Director for the Creative People and Places Project, Creative Barking and Dagenham. Farida, Mohamed and Susanna Wallis are Cultural Connectors, and if anybody had ever offered me that title, I would have run with it. Fantastic title. Together, they're leading the charge as an organisation working from the ground up to ensure a wealth of arts and cultural events are created in the area for and by the people that live there. So Helen, Farida, Susanna, come and tell us all about it. Thank you.
Hello everyone, it's really great to be here. I think we're all a little nervous, possibly me the most. So I'm Helen, and we are going to be talking about our project, which is now in the 4th year. We're going to focus specifically on the Cultural Connectors programme rather than kind of telling you everything about the programme, but we'll be around and we're very happy to kind of answer questions afterwards. So we are one of 21 Creative People and Places projects. Those projects are situated in areas of least arts engagement, and our remit is really to create an action learning project which observes, works with the people living locally and can respond to the barriers that exist, hopefully remove them and set up something more interesting in their place. There are at least another 4 Creative People and Places projects here in the audience, so there's lots of people around if you are interested in that. In Barking and Dagenham, we have been successful in raising the profile of the arts locally, and we've got a lot of evidence to demonstrate that people who previously haven't engaged would now like to see an increase in arts activity. We've got a lot of stats, and particularly for our festival programme, we can show that over half the people that come to our big public outdoor events haven't had an arts experience in the last year. And of those people, the entire crowd that come, 98% of them say they'd like to see more activity like that. So we can demonstrate that there is an appetite for the arts. The way we've worked is to remove the biggest barriers. In each place they'll be different, but for us, the real biggies were complete distrust of power, a real sense of like, don't bother getting involved, someone's going to nick your idea, you know, no one's going to get back to you, utterly pointless. Geography, our geography is hugely challenging. A local councillor summed it up for me really well the other day when he said they built great houses, they had real vision for big estates, they thought about the roads, but they didn't think at all about how life would actually be like within any of those and how that fitted together. So come for a tour anytime and we can demonstrate how challenging it is. And there's also very limited networks, and because you've got distrust anyway, and there's not many places to gather, there's a real sense that it's hard to kind of make a connection, it's hard to meet people locally. In response, we set up the Cultural Connectors, which was a direct kind of response to these challenges, and the vision was about sharing power and maximising our chances of creating a project that felt like the right fit, in the right place at the right time. So the way we work is local people from across the borough choose who we work with, they steer ongoing activity, and they do this through collaborative decision-making panels. So over 300 artists have been connected to our programme so far, and they've all been chosen through a panel structure. So there's a real sense of sharing of power, and also you can see how the power is shared. It isn't happening kind of behind a closed door. We regularly invite people in to observe, even if they're not part of the decision-making process. And in working like this, everyone becomes more networked with new people, and they're encouraged to kind of make their connections and friendships and partnerships. The network is open, it's really important, it never closes, and anyone can join at any time. And that means that awareness comes with it, and so people are kind of spreading their experience of the project all the time. So it's no longer possible to say, I can't detect much local interest in arts and creativity in Barking and Dagenham. That was always a big part of our mission, particularly in the 3 years. It would put a stop to people coming and saying, oh, well, I kind of came, looked around, no one seemed interested. No one seemed interested because it's very hard to meet people. It's not necessarily that no one was interested. So who are the cultural connectors and what do they do? They are aged 17 plus, although there's a caveat with that because we're actually working on a younger version at the moment. They're a Barking and Dagenham resident, or if not, they have a very strong connection to the borough, so they might work there or they might have moved away and still feel quite a draw to spend time there. They need to share our aspiration to increase the amount of creative activity that's on offer in Barking and Dagenham, and they need to be able to respect and listen to others' views. But there are no specific requirements whatsoever of a cultural connector in terms of kind of what they have to do. My experience of working with adults or children is that telling anyone they have to do anything is normally a way to make them not want to do it so much. So the whole idea is it's quite open, it's quite flexible. We like to think of it as volunteering for the 21st century. It doesn't make any assumptions about people's lives and their availability or what's going to happen to them next. There's a lot of change in our borough particularly, but I think there's probably quite a lot of change in modern life these days in terms of people's work availability, etc. And so it's based on the premise that people will want to give time to what interests them, and we don't try to control that. To date, there's over 165 cultural connectors, and our aspiration is to get to at least 260 in the next 3 years. To date, they've commissioned over 300 artists and arts organisations, including Punch Drunk, Geraldine Pilgrim, Chad McHale, Harold Smikler and Close and Remote. A lot of people, including funders, have said to me, in a very genuine but quite surprised tone nonetheless, actually the quality of the art they choose is really good, which is obviously a slightly backhanded compliment, but we'll take it. So now I'm going to hand over to Susanna and Farida, and they're just going to talk a bit about how it is for them.
Hi, I'm Susanna, I'm an artist, and 4 years ago I would never have said that, but there's a metamorphosis for me at the moment, so that will come clear. I was born in Barking and Dagenham in 1968, and I've been a single mum. I've always been embarrassed about saying where I'm from. For one, it's Dagenham. Like, I was born in Barking, live in Dagenham. I'm an Essex girl, so it was always a bit of hassle. Poor reputation of the borough. You know, you come along through your whole life and you've got that sort of on your shoulder all the time. I've lived there most of my life. I've even been a tea lady on the production line at Ford's when it was still open like that. Luckily enough, my family did take me to odd things in London, they're London, 12 miles away. My memory was about 3 years of age being left behind staring at a painting in the National Gallery that was really gory. My parents were like, where's she gone, where's she gone? So that was an arts experience that I remember about 3, and my mum said, you were there, you were staring at this massive painting. So I think that's really important. Art is in my memory from a young child. I left school at 16 and later went to uni, but I was disappointed to come back to the borough. I mean, what was there to do? No one to meet up with, all my mates had moved on, nothing to do, nowhere to go, no coffee shop, nothing. So London was always the place to go to for creative connections, for culture, for inspiration, and anything arts related locally was always a bit down here, a little bit non-progressive, non-challenging, no innovation. And I had a yearning to work in the creative industries, but the opportunities to do that locally were not open to me. I didn't have the right qualification, I didn't have the right connections. Living there felt like being in a cultural desert. Doing anything different made you feel isolated, and any innovation you felt that it was going to be quashed. I felt that I didn't want to stay there, to be honest. I thought, as soon as my daughter's grown up, I've been a single mum in the borough, you know, another great sort of tag to have on you. I didn't want to stay there, I had no connections, I had no purpose, no prospects, and a few friends in the area. So when I met Helen in October 2014, I was quite astounded to hear that this force was coming into the borough. We was at a local arts launch, and I heard about what the CBD, the Creative Barking and Dagenham, was aiming for, and I heard that I could become a cultural connector. Wow, after all that time of watching the tumbleweed, it was quite amazing. So in the time that I've known Creative Barking and Dagenham, it's had a big impact on individuals, groups, and has shifted a borough-wide attitude to arts, culture and festivals. Involvement is ongoing. You can dip in when you want, you can come and go when you want. Participation isn't forced or pressured, and we get great trips. I've been to my first ever opera in the last 3 years, and that was something I always wanted to do, but I felt like, how on earth am I going to be able to afford an opera ticket? But now I've been 2 or 3 times, and it's great. Not only as residents are we able to contribute our voices, our opinions, and we can suggest and innovate, but there's even chances to get paid work and to develop a creative career, which has been immensely important. Going back to the fact that 4 years ago, I couldn't say that I was an artist, I now am. As a cultural connector, we have the chance to socialise with other like-minded people that were previously hidden all around the borough that we didn't know of. We can meet people at high levels in the arts, we can interact with artists, make decisions on local events, and this combination of creative people, or just for those with a creative interest, will bring about change in what is seen as a tough environment. So now there's a small but determined, imaginative task force coming together at all levels, all ages, all cultures, in roles from volunteering to paid and working roles, and enabling what's seen as a dull borough to develop and uncover its latent vibrancy and innovation, and to flourish and prosper. All I can say is this project has been great for me and others like me, and it's made me feel much more confident in my role as an artist.
Hi everyone. Please excuse my nerves. Helen's right, I'm very nervous. Sorry. I'd like to share with you my experience of being a culture connector. Let me tell you a bit about my background. I was born in India, in a small village, came to England, Preston actually, in 1965, more than 50 years ago. Then got married, went to Africa, then we went to Canada. We lived in Canada for a while, came back and lived in Leicester for about 20 years. Again, moved to, because of the family, to Barking about 5 years ago. I've been around, but it was a culture shock basically to come to Barking. I felt trapped. I didn't know where I came. I said, what is this place? I felt trapped because people did not celebrate life, or the communities, or the culture that we share and that we enjoy. And it just felt a very stagnant place. Then I came across this person, culture connector, and she said, come and join us. Be part of a group. And I'm saying, what is the group about? Art. What do I know about art? I don't know anything about art. But then I learned that I didn't have to know the strokes of the brushes or the colors to enjoy fine arts. I learned that I didn't have to know the chords or know how to play the instrument to enjoy a piece of music. I learned that I didn't have to be with the elite society. I didn't have to come from an elite society or have a lot of money to go to a venue and enjoy art, appreciate art. I learned to enjoy art through culture connectors, being a culture connector, Barking in Dagenham, and enjoying communities, music, performances, and getting involved. One thing I was very good at, and I was very good at bringing communities together through events and through culture, being a culture connector, as well as getting involved in events that we do in Barking and Dagenham through the CBD. I got involved and saw the celebrations, bringing people together in form of arts, whether it's the visual arts or spoken arts, any arts basically. And it has been a great journey through Culture Connectors, bringing arts, bringing the place alive basically. And coming from a small village in India, South Asian community, where a woman's opinion did not matter. In fact, I wasn't even asked about my opinions. But being on a panel at as a Culture Connector, making decisions, expressing my views, sharing my ideas, it made me feel valued, valued as a person, valued as a woman, that I was equally great as being a woman. It's no shame in being a woman. And through being a Culture Connectors, we have done trips, which I probably would not have done on my own. For example, we went to Light Festival in Amsterdam, and coming back from the Light Festival and sharing my ideas with other Culture Connectors, sharing the experience, bringing that experience and the ideas and the thoughts that I had to our festivals here, Glow Festival, and sharing that, making these places, making Barking and Dagenham come alive with our festivals, helping to give a reason for people in Barking and Dagenham to feel happy and proud of where they live. Basically, that's all I have to say as Culture Connectors. Thank you for listening.
I've just got a couple more things. Well, that was like 165 different people that would all say something different, and that's the purpose of it. You know, it's not trying to have a specific experience for each person. But I just really need to kind of say a little bit more, because we are from a place that is much maligned. Barking and Dagenham had been labelled in a really helpful right-move poll as being the worst place to live in the country. There's continually kind of headlines like this, that if you look at our local paper, like the press is predominantly negative. So there is always this sense that you are kind of swimming against the tide, and there inevitably, you know, we are not the only project that has ever been. We are actually fortunate enough to be hosted and to work for Studio 3 Arts, who are an arts organisation that have been in the borough now for 30 years. And there is a real tendency in places like that for the good to get ignored and not to kind of be pulled upon. So we just wanted to kind of finish by saying we are surprised that there's so much interest in this programme, but yet there doesn't seem to be that much interest for anyone to do any follow-up, to do anything similar. So we are going to a lot of conferences now, and we are talking, and people are saying, it's fantastic, it's amazing, we want to come and see us. But we kind of want to put a bit of a challenge back out there saying, you know, why don't the arts work with real people more? So we just wanted to say, real people want real life experiences and will give their time to helping something that's live. That's very much what we've found. People want more information. They love the backstory to the arts. They love the story about the artist that's worked hard and hasn't had the X Factor experience. And the stats are definitely not the full picture. In Barking and Dagenham, apparently less than 35% of people are interested in the arts. But I've yet to meet anyone that doesn't have some sort of connection when you talk to them on the street about something that is a craft or a skill or something that was within their family or something they'd like to return to or something they once saw and that has inspired them. So it might not be as hard as you think. Thank you very much.
Please give a warm welcome to Gerry Cadogan, rhymes with Badigan apparently, I was told, from Torbay Public Health. Gerry's worked in the NHS for 25 years, starting in public health and then leading and working on various NHS boards before joining Public Health Torbay in 2009. Leading on mental health and suicide prevention, in 2016, Gerry was awarded the Faculty of Public Health Mental Health Award for her work in developing suicide prevention initiatives in Torbay. Welcome, Gerry.
I don't know how to follow that, really. I mean, you know, you get all these exciting people from Mexico, and you get what's going on this morning, and with this homelessness project, and then you get someone from the local authority, who I know is the bane of your lives. But, and I'm going to walk around a bit now, just to show you my shoes. Just to take attention off what I'm saying. I know I'm speaking to a group of converted people because I work in public health and it is my passion and it is my life. It's not a 9-to-5 job, it's everything I do, and until I'm 100 I'll still be looking at public health. And I know that for you, the work that you're doing is your life and is your passion. And I want to dedicate this talk, depending on how it goes, to a lady called Kate Farmery, who a lot of you may know. She's the executive lead for the Culture Board in Torbay. And she has done more than anyone else I know in the last 18 months to actually bring culture to the real people that was mentioned in Dagenham, because, Torbay and Dagenham, actually there's a little bit of a similarity, I think we might find out in a minute. But she has got so much optimism, and she has learned very quickly one of the important lessons about working with local authorities, that you have to do it very subtly, and you don't take any credit, because you won't get any credit. And recently, she's brought £1.2 million to Torbay, through sheer hard work, working with the communities, working with the community and voluntary sector, working with public health. And actually, there's a bit of a proviso here. I'm here on my annual leave because public health didn't think that coming here was relevant to my work. The good thing about that is that I think it gives me permission to say anything I want. And so basically what Kate has done is she's brought that work to Torbay through loads and loads of work. And £1.2 million is a hell of a lot for Torbay. But it was put out in the newsletter last week, and there was no mention of anything that she said or anything that she'd done. So I wrote an email to her in capital letters saying, why weren't you given any mention? So I thought I'd do it here, and I think she deserves a round of applause, because if you want to know how to do public health and how to do arts and culture in local authorities, you need to come to Torbay, and you need to meet Kate Farmery, and you need to come down to us. Now, it's a little bit embarrassing as well, because everyone else has pages of notes, and these are mine. So, but I do have a slide, just one slide, which is going to come up now, almost by magic. And this is a definition which I love. It's the World Health Organization definition of public health: the art and science of promoting and protecting health and well-being, preventing ill health and prolonging life through the organised efforts of society. And I know it sounds a bit pompous, but it's that phrase, the art and science, which really gets to me. Because so much of the work that I do, and my background is as a scientist, but the way that I've been working with people like Kate and with the community and the voluntary sector, and the way that I've been working with the communities, has been to use my skills about numbers and research, because you can find research about anything you want, and then you can find research which disproves anything that you want. So there's, you can get that research, but the art and science of working together is just the real skill of working with local authorities and with public health. And yet, it's not something that every person from public health understands. And I've got some fantastic colleagues who say things like, when I hear the phrase, culture and arts, it just leaves me cold. But they're the people who will come into work the next day and say, oh, I saw a brilliant film last night. Did you see it? Or have you heard this latest CD? Or have you listened to that book? Or I went to the Tate Modern. It was brilliant. But there is a separation between what they're doing and their work. Whereas you and I know that it's all part of it. Everything we're doing is about art, is about culture, is about public health, is about politics, is about the world. But don't assume that everybody understands that. Now, you may have noticed there's a river there. It's not just for picturesque, it's nothing compared to Brazil or anything like that, and I appreciate that. But we talk in public health about upstream, downstream work. And the work that I do in public health is very much about the upstream work at the top right-hand corner there, about trying to prevent people from falling into the river. So my work is about trying to prevent people taking their lives, trying to prevent people from their mental health getting worse. 75% of people who take their lives have never been anywhere near the mental health services. They might have been to their GP, but they won't have spoken to anybody. A lot of the work that you hear about in A&E and in mental health services is about the crisis work, which is downstream work, where people are trying to pull people out of the river. And some of those people don't get out of the river, as we know. Your work relates to that whole river, right out into the open sea, because we know, and you know, that there is plenty of evidence and plenty of research which shows that you can help to keep emotional health and well-being well in the population, and for physical well-being as well, and that you can also help people down at the other end, at the downstream, who've got dementia, who've got severe mental health problems, who've got severe long-term conditions. You can do all of that. And if we can work together on that, which is the sort of thing that we're trying to do in Torbay, then we can really move mountains. And there may only be little mountains in Torbay, but they're big mountains. We only have 135,000 people, for God's sake. It's not, it's not as if it's a massive task. But we also have incredible levels of deprivation. I'm not very popular with the mayor because I tend to produce data which shows all the sort of data that you don't want to have if you're attracting people to a place like Torbay, i.e. the English Riviera, because we've got the highest rate of suicides in young and middle-aged men. We've got enormously high rates of divorce. We've got very high rates of self-harm in young people. We've got very high rates of divorce. I could go on. There must be something we've got a low rate of, but I can't quite bring it to mind at the moment. But so this is the work that Kate and the team of people that she's working with, and she's working with the community in the voluntary sector and with people like myself in public health who get her, and also I think she realised I got her. I don't know, I get it. And you see, the thing is, a lot of it is about personalities, isn't it, And then personalities move on and someone else doesn't have the same perspective. But we really are doing some incredible things. So to be honest, Kate, who's very humble and, is probably thinking, oh God, why is she going on about this all the time? The people that matter, the people in the community in the voluntary sector, the users, the people that she is helping with the services that she's developing, all love her. So actually it doesn't matter what the local authority think at all and what people think. The other thing is about data. Now, you hear a lot, as commissioners, as important people like what we are, commissioners and contractors will say, what's the evidence? Where's the data? What are the statistics? Well, let me tell you, I sat in a meeting yesterday, which was 2 hours of my life that I will never get back, where we talked about data about one project. And there was the problem that there was the data that the local analysts had, there was the data that the Office of National Statistics had, there was the data that NHS England had, those were the data that Public Health England had. And none of it related. And it was all from different years. So to be honest, you know, when we're talking about data, you have the best data and research that is around to demonstrate the effectiveness of what you do. I think the one little problem that I may have is that some of the, you'll hear all about the pressures about GPs, and some of the GPs that I have a lot of respect for that deal with mental health are saying, I can't afford to keep some of the counsellors, some of the arts workers, some of the gardeners and listening and learning and gardening projects that are going, because although they're really successful and people keep telling me how successful they are, the people keep coming back to me. So that difficulty that you have is that if you're going to develop some works with the with your community projects and so on, to really win the NHS over and the local authority over is that the people feel fulfilled enough that they don't still have to go back to their GP on a weekly basis or so on. That's a little bit of worry that I'm finding around. But I noticed that I'm 53 seconds over. But I will just give a couple of things that were mentioned this morning. I mean, we'd put a whole of a lot of research into, like I said, finding that physical exercise is really, really important in helping people's emotional health and well-being, and that dancing was. Now, Hippocrates managed to mention this a few years ago, so why we have to keep talking about all of that still now and spend research on? Paula mentioned this morning a bit about being a disruptive influence. Be a disruptive influence. I'm a disruptive influence and I'm still here. Maybe not after this talk, but I'm still here. And arrogance. The commissioners, the local authorities, the NHS, they are darned arrogant. And I will include myself in that, because we will say, we need this and we need that and we need something else. You need to be just as arrogant. You're not inferior to them. You're on the same level. You've got the evidence, you've got the enthusiasm, and you've got the optimism, which certainly is not something that's there in the local authorities at the moment. So I'll just leave you with 3 words: challenge, challenge, and challenge. Thank you very much.
A provocation on place. I'm not an expert in my own experience, so what I've done is just try to edit some of my recent notes on place and try and share them. Hopefully some of them make sense, some probably don't make sense. So, 3 memories circa 1975. Witness the beauty of the great Cupid Festival, which excites curiosity as the townsfolk are dancing at the touch of brownish water thrown from squirt guns. They are seized by pretty women while all along the roads the air is filled with singing and drum beating. Everything is coloured yellowish red and rendered dusty by the heaps of scented powder blown all over. That's from the Ratnaval's 7th century drama. A gorilla remains a gorilla. I encountered a different kind of holy during an excruciatingly slow summer vacation. The family were visiting my parents in a newly minted upper middle class housing development. The rapid expansion of the then Bombay pushed the new suburbs so far away from the colonial splendour of the Chhatrapati Shiva Terminus station, Victoria Terminus, and she did terminate, that the city was already a forgotten moment in the hot, wet journey to days of boredom with Auntie G's intermittent and unwelcome moist kisses and by Aya's monumental cooking. Anyway, awaiting his powdery anointment, my grandfather sat at the centre of the street generating a presence that exceeded his body. Whatever we did to him, taunting with colour, water and the gleeful boyhood screechings, he remained the paternal centre, his power equalised but not equalised but dramatised. The prop he used, simply a chair. His force assumed, inherited, eternal. An introduction to infrastructure. As a necessary relief for my parents and for a long-suffering brother and sister, Some teenage children belonging to family friends agreed, probably under duress, to take this unformed child on an exciting sightseeing trip. It transpired that a great deal of the sightseeing was in fact walking to wherever we were going. The walk was unexpected, both in its duration and by what bounded the road. I learnt then that infrastructure was cheaper when not buried below the ground. The mains water supply to the new suburb lined each side of the road. As a 6-year-old, they towered above my head, forming 2 long steel walls that receded to the horizon. At this time, and until quite recently, large sections of the local community had no access to sanitation. The local children, in an eloquent critique of the material, political, economic and social conditions, had taken to using the top surface of the pipes as an informal latrine. The sheer engineering form of the pipe was punctuated intermittently by modest organic gifts. Interventions. Harm. I will utterly reject harm and mischief is an axiom of the Hippocratic Oath. I assert sovereignty, but only over my body. That's my body. I will only share with consent. This appears not to move on. How do I move on? Go away. The actual slide's been missed, which is a shame. So you have to imagine behind me are 2 hoardings by the Battersea Power Station development site, one in massive Helvetica saying industrial magic, and the other with a Libeskind, Daniel Libeskind? Yes, image of a Libeskind building with the frame, "We don't do ordinary." The much contested site of Battersea Power Station has undergone over many decades repeated reimaginings until one congealed around the complex equations of land value. It calls in stock. Planning permissions are no longer pending. This is very familiar to some of us. Its gain agreed. Moolah. Holdings go up, concrete is poured, and from the tainted ground, a new space is constructed. Then we, the citizen, also have to reimagine this land, accept this new narrative, this possibility for space. 2 follows quite appropriate, actually. Anyway, it is too late for an alternative view. It is being built. We have to imagine it. We have to reimagine it. Through this tactical word and image-based language of the hoarding, we are encouraged to allow a writing over of our knowledge with their vision. We are pressed to unimagine. To reimagine is to also stop imagining. It is also to forget. In this case, it is to replace what we might have known with their vision, what the developers might want us to see, and this is in advance of their vision being fixed in concrete. They have done the work for us. On our behalf, teams of industrial strength Imagineers have reimagined so concretely, so effectively, that soon we'll be able to pause, if only for a while, with the actual spaces of their imaginations. We don't do ordinary, oddly connected to industrial magic. Who then would do or choose the ordinary if the extraordinary is also available? Try to imagine the choice. What would you do? Choose ordinary. Another way of writing this, the extraordinary is the new ordinary. Who would sell We Do Ordinary? The consortium of investment companies, through the agency of an agency, seek to show us how to read this space in advance so that we can eventually occupy it in their terms. Perhaps they are simply offering what was once extraordinary through making it ordinary, the same as everywhere else, familiar, home. Effect. Let us look to the character Alex from Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange. Alex's family home was situated in a fictional town created through fragmented elements of Thamesmead. The reel provided the dystopian stage or image space for a totally enclosed, brutalish social housing project. Thamesmead was developed as an important element of London slum clearances. At the same time, or in the past, at the same time of writing, Joseph Bazalgette's great civic water project, we also find here its terminus, the terminus of the city's effluent. What is consumed in Knightsbridge ends up in Thamesmead. Affluent, effluent. The delicate plated morsels processed through the multiple and mostly privileged alimentary canals move downstream where a secondary digestion occurs. Here the alimentary products are ordered through a more fundamental process. Here excrement is rendered safe through an anaerobic redigestion. This is an attempt to produce neutral materials that are safe for discharge towards a reabsorption, a reconsumption, and ultimately made ready for recirculation. So the results of this structure are produced through 2 digestions, and it can create an odour. More than smell, more like an indelible mist that is carried away on the prevailing westerly wind away from the city. The prevailing wind is not constant. When the circumstances are right, the wind shifts and the odour drifts back upstream. So this is from the script. A tramp lying in a tunnel singing. Shadows of the boys approaching fall across the tramp. Alex in voiceover. One thing I could never stand is to see a filthy, dirty old drunkie howling away at the filthy songs of his father, going blurp, blurp. In between his might be a filthy old orchestra and his stinking rotten guts. I could never stand to see anyone like that, whatever his age might be, but more especially when he was real old like this one was. The boys stop and applaud him. Tramp. Can you spare me some cutting, me brothers? Alex rams a stick into the tramp's stomach. The boys laugh. Oh, the tramp says. Go on, do me in, you bastard cowards. I don't want to live anyway. Not in this stinking world like this. Alex. Oh, and what's so stinking about it? Tramp. It's a stinking world because there's no law and order anymore. It's a stinking world because it lets the young get into the old like you just done. It's no world for an old man anymore. What sort of world is it at all? Men on the moon and spinning round the earth, and there's no attention paid to earthly law and order no more. The tramp starts singing again. Oh dear land, I fought for thee and bought you peace and victory. Here in the underpass, the only population that can dwell are the disconnected, those with no places to go. Alex and his gang are mobile. Their freedom of movement is facilitated by the architecture. Impositions. Swiss chronobiologist Augustin Pyramus de Candolle, 1778 to 1841, observed that under certain conditions, plant leaf structures followed cyclical morphologies that did not, as was more usually the case, synchronize the movement of the sun. His hypothesis linked the idea of an endogenous biological clock to the possibility of its experimental disruption. The object of study, Mimosa pudica, was subjected to constant light. Here, Mimosa's circadian rhythm could not synchronize with the sun. The plant was suspended in a uniform space separated from the heliotropic forces of the natural environment within which it evolved. Despite this, the plant found its own rhythms. Its leaves opening and closing in cycles below 23 hours, the phototropic. Through immersing mimosa in steady radiance, the leaves' regular furling and subsequent unfurling sped up. This moment in biological enlightenment provides a basis from which to speculate that cities are assemblages of endogenous clocks, and the event of their luminal hypersaturation has caused them to distort experiences of time and place. Are we now living in a state of phototropia? To conclude, blades. A whirligig, a form that wants to fly, it's tied to the earth but still spinning and folding ideas, energy, production, labour, the city's a place to inhabit and visit. It transformed Victoria Square, imposing a massive object that, sailing behind the Queen, divided the space and created a new centre of attention. The twisting wing, although inert, at rest in the square, spoke to me of movement, but not of freedom. I am minded of J.G. Ballard's recurring images of the ossification of flight and body in landscapes that are once of this earth and of an elsewhere. Ballard conjures an intensely visual terrain. However, it is the emotional deadening and silence that lingers with me. Even so, in these layered images of flight's death, movement captured in a crystal world, the illuminated man remains beautiful, more beautiful. The terrain and the glowing figure point us towards a negative future. Or can we see through a different filter? Or is all this an abyssal ready-made, fated to enter the endless spinning repetition of recycling and resurrection? It might present an image of the civic and the valorization of labour, technology, green energy, ecological disaster, global finance capital and cultural capital. This object denied a use by us in order to find another, a washed-up, drowned giant, a carcass, a dead weight, an interruption, a wonder, and an inorganic gift. Thank you.